QB chasing.
G'day, listeners. This episode is proudly brought to you by our major sponsor, Gym Journal. Please use the code MATTER, all capitals, at checkout, and you'll receive a discount on your next purchase. Please find the link in the description.
G'day, listeners, and welcome back to another very special episode of the Matter Mentality podcast, where we talk all things training, nutrition, and psychology to optimize your performance. This week, we are joined by another very special guest, another awesome connect that we managed to make over in the States. There's been a lot of fruit that has come from that seed that was planted, I guess, that has led to some really amazing relationships we've built so far, and we're just going to keep nurturing them. We're joined by Jeriah Hardin, health coach from Marek Health. How are you doing, brother? How are you? How's the States? How is everything since we saw you last?
Yeah, everything's been going really well, man. I think that coaching summit that we attended did bear a lot of great fruit and relationships for everybody. So I'm really glad that we were all able to make it out to that.
Man, it was a toss of the coin back in December when Cav invited us. He's like, we joined his end of year coaching call, and the next day he called up. He's like, so this is going to be happening, and Ben's going to be speaking at this event. What do you think? And we're just like, I don't even have a passport yet, let alone like I lost my passport like a year ago or something. I can't remember where it was. I was trying to find. I'm like, I don't have a passport. Never been to America. June, like, when was it? August. August is like peak exam time, peak assessment time, and peak prep time for my clients. And I'm like, Cav's just like, yep, we're doing this. You're going to throw this in August. What do you think? Sure, man. No worries. It was like such the cost risk analysis had to be weighed up, but it was like, how often do you get invited internationally to speak at a conference where no one knows who you are to like take that step? And we were just like, look, it's either going to be worth it or it's going to cost us 10 grand in trip and costs, and we'll get a good experience out of it. And that's it. But it has honestly returned tenfold the investment of getting over there, being able to connect with yourself, you guys, the Marek team, Ali, like Cav, Kane, the Catalyst crew, like everyone. So, absolute pleasure to have you on and be able to talk the shit that we're about to talk.
Right. Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, no, it's that was a pretty fun group of people. I learned a lot, and like even through I wasn't really sure going into it what the even structure of the whole event was going to be. Like I kind of just got like tapped to come. They had me do a lot of those events, so it's like, okay, we'll see what it's like. And then it was really great just to kind of be somewhere for coaches by coaches, you know, and see different perspectives and things like that. And I think it definitely yielded a lot of fruitful relationships, and kind of connecting with Cav a little bit was cool. And getting to chat with people of that, because there's not when you get to kind of that level, there's not as many people that are at that level. And so anytime you kind of get an opportunity to really connect with those people, and you always, you go into it, you're like, I wonder what this guy's going to be like. And everybody's so cool, man. You know what I mean? You meet people and you're like just excited that, they're a part of the same, kind of group of people.
Yeah, it was one thing I noticed too, is like, even more so, like I got off stage, and me and him had a chat as well. And he's just like, everything you just said and presented is how I coach my athletes, these, and like, it's just cool to see literally from diverse backgrounds of different countries and different populations. Like the guys in the audience that paid, they're obviously looking to learn and upskill and get to that level. And not that I even consider myself at that level, but then coming off stage and having other people that I'm looking to, and I'm like, I respect Marek. I see what you guys do. I like the education. I look at the smart side of coaching, and people are agreeing on at least some of the basic premises and the basic like philosophies to getting people healthy and jacked. And it's just cool to see like people connecting so unique in how they do things or where they've come from, but still connecting with that genuine love of coaching and love of education, where I was like, these are my people. Like it's so rare for me. Like one of the things, like you're probably the same way, but I don't find myself with massive circles anymore. I find myself with intricate people that, I give to them, they give to me. It's like that, to have those people to me is more important than like, I've got my group of bros where we all just sit around and get pissed. So like adding to that from around the world, I was like, this is fucking sick. These are my people. I need to be over here talking to them more.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Definitely, as I feel like as I get older, my circle gets a little smaller, but it gets a little more specific, right?
Yeah.
It's really finding, the people that have, not necessarily just the same values, but kind of the same, you know, ideas or want to do the same things. I think it's really important to surround yourself with those people. That's, to be honest, 100% of any success that I've had. I'm not anywhere near where I want to be,
Mhm.
has come from meeting people like you, people like Cav, working with
Yeah.
Marek. I got my job at Marek through Little Smoky,
Yeah.
right? Stephen Granzella, because I used to train at Super Training with him, and he knew I was in telemedicine, and he knew I had an interest in hormones and all those
Yep.
things. So that's how I ended up with Marek Health. Was Smokey was like, "Hey, you do telemed, right? We need some patient care coordinators," is what we used to call ourselves, before we transitioned to being health coaches.
Yep.
And I was like, "Yeah, let me interview." So I interviewed with Memo,
Yep.
and Brandon, and then kind of ended up with I think I did 2 interviews, like a clinical interview and just kind of a shoot the shit interview. And a few days later, I was on the payroll, and I was like, sweet, this is gonna be a fun ride.
And that's it. It's fun when you get to the shoot the shit interview and you're just talking absolute shit and you're like, oh yeah, I can click with these guys.
Yeah. And it was really great. I knew. Well, it was interesting too, because I'd found Marek initially through Derek's YouTube channel, More Player Dates.
Yep.
He had like advertised Marek, right? And I was like, okay, because I was already on TRT at that point, and I
Yep.
was like, kind of happy with my clinic, but thought I could probably get more coaching and guidance and a little bit
Yeah.
more comprehensive blood work. And I saw that Marek offered that. And so I actually went through the whole process and became a patient at Marek before I even knew Smokey was involved there. I think it might have been before he was even involved there. And then so I was they were like, yeah, do you want to get set up with a consultation? I was like, I already saw the doctor, Jamie, he's actually uh, he's from Australia as well. He's going to medical school down there now, Australian cat, and he was my PCC, and I was like, Jamie was great, everything was awesome. Like, I know what you guys are about because I've been through the process. And so that was kind of cool to come onto a company where I knew that their product or what they were offering people was
Yeah.
something that I'd already experienced and knew that there was value in.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty reassuring for me to be able to come on and know that I was throwing my hat in the right ring.
Yeah. I mean, like, like once you know that product, right, it's easy to believe it and actually be excited to do it as a job.
Right. Yeah.
So let's take a
Pretty good
back
stuff.
pedal because this happens every time. I just get excited, chat, start talking, and the next minute it's like, oh, let's do an intro 40 minutes into the conversation. So before we join Marek, give us a background on how you get there. I know we sort of had a little quick chat off the air, and even Cav said to me, he's like, when you talk to Jeriah, you're going to hear some fantastic stories. So when Cav says that, I usually know there's a fun story coming up. That dude's a walking lesson and like wisdom generator. It's just like, yep, talk to this guy and you're going to have a fun time. There's a story there somewhere. Okay. So give us a background, man, because we're going to have some chats. Like even Brooklyn, she came up to me and she's like, I don't think you know this, but there's another guy here who's a World War II nerd. There's another guy here who's like a hormone nerd. I'm like, oh, I love this guy already. So give us a background. Give us background as to who you are, where you come from, and how you got to working with Marek. Because that's not a small feat. Marek, they're big at what they do and they're good at what they do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so I'm originally from Oregon, which is it's a pretty small state. I think there's maybe like 3.5 million people in the whole state. Small for us here at least. And I ended up, for example, like you move to Sacramento, this greater Sacramento area has the same amount of people as the whole state that I'm from originally, right? So it's kind of small. And you know, basically, I grew up homeschooled. My grandfather was a really big history buff, and he kind of like passed that on to me. And so just ever since, I was a little kid, history was my favorite subject. I think, to me, I think World War II and the times of pride, like surrounding, I don't want to, I'll go on a tangent on this, but I'll just say something. Like, I think it's a really great period of time to see all of the, political changes and thought processes that people were going, just trying to figure out how to make things better for themselves or for the people that they cared about. Russia, Germany, the US, Japan, like all those places were just trying to kind of carve out their slice of the pie, right? Maybe they did it in the wrong way, obviously, most of the time. But I think it's really interesting to go through the ideology and see what kind of led to some of those those negatives, and kind of make sure we don't. The only way we can secure our future is by understanding the past, I think. And so I think that's really important. But anyway, grew up homeschooled. I finished high school around 16, started college pretty early. I've I can't stop going back to school. Like, I think when we were talking about it, I probably take a semester or two every year or two, just to kind of stay in the loop on things that I'm interested in. And I went to, actually right there, Oregon State University, go Beavs.
I'm going to interject just really quick. You guys, the care and like passion you guys have for your universities, I think I told like everyone else, we don't have that here. If you were to tell me what is the logo or mascot of my university, I couldn't tell you from a bar. So you guys get so like even post graduation, you guys are like, no, these guys are shit. We're gonna kill them. These guys are better. Go this thing. It's like, we don't have that.
There's a deep-seated need to be at conflict as an American, and I think that our universities allow us to do that, because I still watch. We call, between the Oregon Ducks and the Oregon State University Beavers, we call their rivalry match the Civil War, and people get pretty serious about it. Like, very,
that's
very
fantastic.
You'll see families divided in the living room on both sides. One side will be wearing green, one side will be wearing orange, and they'll just be talking shit to each other all day. It's my favorite thing, man. I love it. But so started out exercise and sports science, moved into kinesiology just because I always kind of had a thing for human movement. I enjoy physics and numbers and things like that. So not that I'm any good at it, I just enjoy it.
Just enjoy it, yeah.
But just enjoy it, They can be, and most of the time, unfortunately, they are. So but man, so did all that stuff. There was an interim time, actually, that, and this will lead into my time working on the state opioid crisis, the opioid epidemic in California. I actually spent some time addicted to some pretty harsh substances, methamphetamine and heroin. I was actually an IV drug user for a little while before I ended up pulling things together. My grandfather was actually a drug and alcohol counselor for the tribe that we're part of. I'm part Native American. I'm part of the Grand Ronde tribe, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
Oh,
wow. And so a lot of my family still lives on the reservation, my grandparents included, and I just kind of hit a rock bottom a little bit, and then had him to lean on, which was amazing, because he's always guided me, and I've always trusted him, and he's never been judgmental. He's always just been there to help. And so having that was probably paramount in kind of getting things put back together. And then realized that I wanted to help people. So I actually spent 7 years as a wildland firefighter, was the medic on our team there for a lot of those years. Moved up to squad boss, which is, you've got about 5 guys you're responsible for keeping alive. And then was training to take over a crew before I ended up retiring. I had a pretty bad fire where I actually collapsed on the line. I had 80-pound pack and a chainsaw, and there was a lot of inversion on the smoke, and ended up with a heat stroke. And then now I can't be out in the heat like that anymore. Ever since then, kind of have a heat aversion now. So had to retire from that, which I love doing. I think about it all the time, but just health wise with some of the things that happened to the lungs, it just wasn't in the cards anymore. After a little while, went back to school, became a drug and alcohol counselor, worked for a couple of years, setting up telemedicine programs for tribes in California, Native Americans and Alaska Natives in California, to kind of support Suboxone treatment, which I think is huge for some of those communities who don't have access to medicine. Did a little bit of it was cool because we were hooked up with USC for the first little bit, and so we collected research, and we actually got some research published through USC from our program. And then we ended up working with UCLA a little bit further on down the road to kind of map out what was actually going on with the opioid epidemic with the American Indian, Alaska Natives in California. So that was pretty satisfying work to do, to come back from having those issues and being a part of that community myself, and then actually going and being a part of trying to make things better for those communities. So
yeah, wow. I mean, yeah, pretty big story. It's pretty big. There's a few things in there.
Man. Yeah,
there's a few things in there. I mean,
yeah,
it's exciting to me there, because some of that stuff is what we've touched in my degree and what we study. So, part of our core curriculum is psychodynamics, psychopharmacology. So we get into pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, but more so understanding the intricacies of the way, psychiatric treatments can work with people in drug and drug treatments, drug protocols, and that sort of stuff in regard to psychology. But then one of the other core subjects we have to do in Australia is drug and alcohol studies. So we have to look at the interlooping connections between drugs, alcohol, addiction, addictive behaviors, patterns, and the way it can impact things, different forms of drugs, hallucinogens, stimulants, relaxants. And it gets far more complicated than I think people give true appreciation for. Like when you see the general person just be like, don't get me wrong, I've done it too, and I still have times where I do it, and I'm like, look, at the end of the day, a decision was made. There was choices made, and things led to more choices, and things led to more choices. So we need to preamble the choices being made that are negative. We need to prevent those things from before. It's easier to prevent by preventing than it is to fix after the fact. So how do we get to that point where we understand preventing that action or choice from being available or happening, or having the tools to say no, things like that? But seeing the data and seeing the research and seeing everything and how it goes on, and the kind of psychosocial environmental dynamics that go into drug and alcohol is so much more complex than people give credit to. Just, oh, that guy just did crack, or this guy's now addicted to this, or it's just like even just a quick tangent. I remember seeing around the early outbreak of the opioid epidemic in America, even in middle class white men, everyone just went through this phase where it was like, oh, drug addicts are just lower class, lower tier people, blah, blah, blah. And I remember reading some research and going into even a document series that was on it, that a large portion of opioid users in America were actually middle-class family men, because they would come from injuries and injury history. They come from prescription medication to treat injuries. And then obviously, like you guys with the pharmaceutical privacy system that you guys have, it went I think it was five prescriptions, then stop. And then it became the only pharmacological structure that was similar to the opioid was heroin. And that was the only way that these guys could get a similar pain alleviation, because it was a lot of pain treatment, medical prescription, not pain solution or pain, I guess, rehabilitation. Management. So you're not fixing the injury, you're just band-aiding with drugs. Well, then that drug's been cut off. Now, well, what's the next drug that I'm addicted? What's the drug closest to that pain alleviation that I've got on the tolerance of dependency that I've now received? Well, the only structure that mimics that is going to be heroin. Okay, well, how do I get that? Well, now you've got middle-class white guys with a family, a 2-story house, the white picket fence American dream, getting addicted to heroin, and now we've got an opioid epidemic, and everyone's like, oh, it's just the lower crackheads. And you're like, well, no, actually.
Actually, it's a lot of people. Yeah. That was a really interesting situation. I mean, with the Oxycontin, when they started marketing that here, that company actually had a lot of misdeeds when they first started marketing that, as far as the potential for addiction and things like that. And I think you can see that in the many lawsuits that have been filed that they've lost since then. But yeah, it's really interesting to kind of dig into. You realize that it's something that affects everyone, and I think that's another, I'm not a big fan of the healthcare system here for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that we just put an emphasis on the wrong points, largely. Kind of like you were saying, it's like, okay, you're injured, here's this pain medication. How much follow-up is there with rehabilitation, and then teaching people how to move the right way, and then how to maintain muscle mass and strength so those injuries don't occur again. Here it's like almost all lower back things, herniated discs, things like that. And those things can be chronic issues if you don't teach people the right movement patterns. You'd be surprised how many people don't even know how to pick up a box off the ground without throwing their back out, and you'd think that would be a larger part of the conversation, but it's just like drugs, a little bit of rehabs, you're out of luck, which is unfortunately what led us to the path that got us to the opioid crisis, I think.
Yeah, which is an incredibly ridiculous outcome for something that's so not trivial, but like the solution is so much more in the problem than just adding more to the problem. Like looking at pain management, pain reduction therapy, like treatment, rather than prescription treatment. Like just assessing that, preventing the exposure to the drug in the first place. Like if you treat the pain at the problem, not with a Band-Aid, well, now you're not even exposed to the opioid to get addicted to it, or you're not even exposed to the pain medication to start the process of addiction. You're simply treating it before it happens. It's the same when I look at, like, when I see everyone, similar but not similar, I see people talk about, boss babe Christina lost 200 pounds. Go her. That's fantastic. She's added X amount of time to her life. Hold on. Why is no one talking about how she got 300 to 400 pounds? Why aren't we having that conversation? To me, like the solution being like, oh, we fixed her, like, yes, but how do we get there? What's the preventative mechanism here that we can work on? How do we solve that to prevent people from getting to 400, 500, 600 pounds and being like, oh, now you're healthy again? Well, you could have been healthy the whole time. Like it didn't need to go that way.
Well, that's one of the interesting things that I think I found out going through. And you got to remember, through almost all this time, when I think I got certified as a personal trainer for the first time when I was like 20, 21. Yep. I started playing football when I was 11 or 12. I've been in sport. I think I did my first squat when I was 11 or 12 years old. And so I've been involved in this stuff for a very long time. I started coaching it in my early 20s. I'm in my mid 30s now. I turned 34 in October. So I have like a decent amount of time under the bar, in one way or another. And I think one of the coolest things for me was learning that the difference between someone who is obese or unhealthy or living an unhealthy lifestyle and someone who is abusing overusing drugs of abuse, they're very similar in their thought patterns and in their behaviors and in their habits. And so connecting those dots and being able to use, because now I'm able to use two what are seemingly thought of as separate fields and kind of bring those ideals. You when you did your presentation at the coaching conference, I thought it was really cool. You had the stages of change up there, and I've never seen anybody like in this coaching atmosphere kind of use that before. And I was like, oh, really? Shit, that's what I've been thinking forever. Yeah. And so I thought that was really cool. That's when I knew we were going to connect, because I was like, that is fucking what I think. This is what I'm thinking about. How that's how this all works. And I think the more people start to put that together, we're going to start getting a lot more dynamic with our capabilities at actually coaching people across the finish line or using preventative methods. And I think that what happens is people like us figure out what's going on, and then eventually that gets into policy. That's one of the biggest things that I'm kind of a proponent of now is trying to work with some of my friends who are psychiatrists or psychologists or whatever, board members of this or that, and say, like, how do we get this into policy where we're actually getting the information out to people in a structured manner where it's being taught to them when they're younger, I think is going to be kind of the key to avoid a lot of the health consequences we're seeing of people's lifestyles now.
100%. So I've got a few things we'll double back to here, just because, again, everyone that listens to my podcast so far, or people who listen know in general, I don't do structure. We're going to interlude about 51 different things in here and eventually wrap up a conversation. So that's the end. So
Right.
what he's referring to there in the stages of change model. So I don't really show my clients these things. Usually I'll talk them through something, or I'll work them through, like, especially if someone, a lot of the way that we market or sell the business is that the pre-contemplation stage is already taken care of. Someone reaching out has been so engaged with our content, in our marketing, in our results, in our social media, YouTube, whatever, that they're already looking at it going, well, I want to be a part of that team. I want to be a part of that community and culture and environment because they get shit done. So we kind of move everyone to that contemplation stage pretty quickly because they're already there. So what we're talking about here is that the trans theoretical model of change, which is a very big proponent of behavior change, which originally started to help people work through drug and alcohol addiction. It's been transcended, I feel, very well into behavioral change for coaching if it's done properly. I don't think enough people know about it, and I think a lot of coaches think they understand things like this. When you get like Joe Schmuck who's like, discipline over motivation, you've just got to want it, and you're like, shut the fuck up, you don't understand what you're talking about. It's just why people hate you. It's just not how it works when we look at psychosomatic engagement. And people are just like, yeah, just wake up at 4 a.m. and just do the thing. Yep, that's great. If that was that easy, we'd all do it. So the trans-theoretical model goes through a 6-stage process where you have pre-contemplation, contemplation, action. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, action. Oh, that's going to challenge me here. Action, maintenance. Nope. There's one I'm missing. Action, maintenance, relapse. Yeah, there's one missing.
That sounds pretty close.
That's pretty close, right? So the big one that gets me and people struggle to comprehend is the relapse stage, right? So this is where it's big in drug and alcohol, but it's also big in coaching. And this is something that I really try to push with people when we understand it. I don't base my clients' progress on their action stage. I base a lot of my clients' progress on how much they fall at the relapse stage. So if I have a client that we're working on behavior change through, like, eating patterns, body image, binge eating, optimizing lifestyle, turning down drinking and alcohol, things like that on a prep. If they are falling less each time or landing at a higher level, that to me is an indication of scaffolding, which is to me an indication of progress. So it's easy to go great when everything's going great, right? Like, you'd agree. But when you fall, how far do you fall? Do you fall back to baseline where we started, like, 6 months ago? Or is it like, the thing that you originally thought would never be possible is now where you fall down to? So that to me is the indication I use for progress, where I'm like, oh, this person's actually getting really far. They felt like they fucked up because they had, a few pieces of extra bread. But when we first started, they were having whole pieces of cake and donuts at 2 a.m. in the morning. So we've made some substantial change here. So, that model is so indicative of someone's progress at the worst end. And people often look at, clients' progress like, yeah, he's lost 50 kilos and he doesn't touch any alcohol anymore. And he doesn't have any. Okay, but what if he does? What happens? How do they feel if they had X, Y, Z? So that's just what we're referring to there is the trans theoretical model of change, which is very big in the counseling space, but also I think something needs to be taken off more in the general comprehension of coaching space. Again, like I sort of talked about at the summit, people do a lot of physiology and they do a lot of nutrition and they go, that's all coaching is. And every single person worth a grain of sand goes, actually, up here is, where psychology has to combine all of it and make sure it works well.
And I would argue that those things can only happen once you control the psychology side of things.
I'd agree.
I think that if you think of it, I think that the psychology of things kind of stands up here, because if you don't really understand what's driving people to habituate things, either positive or negative, then you can't understand. You could tell them how to eat, what to eat, how to train, when to train, what to train. That is the easiest part, man. Either one of us, I'm sure, could put a program together where we could just eat and train, and it would be great if we both followed it to the T, right? We could just trade. Here's a program. Great. Yeah, stick to it. It works. But that's not the tough part. The tough part is how to engage. No, it's not. It's the tough part is how to engage you in a way that's going to get you to make these behavioral modifications something that's permanent. And I like what you said, like how far do they fall after we kind of reach a goal, right? Like where does the baseline come to be set? That's the most important thing. What were you able to kind of build as a foundation? What were you able to build into, what were you able to habituate in a way that's kind of there on a subconscious level?
Yeah.
Even anymore, even if it's drinking water or 10-minute walks after you eat or sleep height. Like I just make sure my TV and my screens are off an hour before I'm going to bed, so I don't have that blue light exposure, and I wake up and I go to bed at the same time. People drastically underestimate those small things and try and kind of get into way more like nuanced things than they need to before they've even kind of established the course. Like, how are you sleeping? What are you eating? Why are you eating that way? Those are the things that really need to be covered, and they just kind of go like get passed over by most coaches so often. It really blows me away. The first thing I ask a new client is how do you sleep? How much do you sleep?
Yeah.
Do you go to bed at the same time? Do you wake up at the same time?
Yeah.
Are you on your phone right before you go to bed? What are you doing first thing in the morning? Are you slamming a coffee, in the dark, in your dark kitchen? Or are you outside, stretching out, getting some sun? It's very simple. And a lot of people who are much smarter than me, like, you'd think if you watch like one Andrew Huberman podcast or listen to one Peter Attia book, you'd probably have everything you need to get your shit straight. But you have to teach people those things, right? You can hear them all you want, but how do you get that through to a person that's where the money is as a coach, because then you build a client who trusts you and who's going to stay with you even after they get their results, because they know that you understand them and what makes them tick. And when you understand what makes someone tick, you can get them to do anything.
Yeah. And the crazy part to me too is like when I get a client results on such little work, like they get they get amped up, ramped up, they're pumped because they're like, fuck, I've dropped 10 kilos or my body fat's down doing this. And it's like, brother, all we've done is optimize your nutrition, and we've spaced out some vegetables and protein, and we've got you training 4 days a week with more steps. That's 4 very basic parts of coaching. We've just taken our time to get that right. So if this is the result we've got from that little intervention, imagine what we do long term when you give me full optimal training and you give me an optimized lifestyle and you give me optimized data and entry and accountability. That's when shit gets fun. That's when we start manipulating full peak body composition. So, it's just like you said, people get to that point where it's big in Australia where people claim, mindset. I don't know if it's big over there in America. A few of you have kind of heard of it. A few of you haven't that I've spoken to, but we have this mindset surge at the moment where some girl who's 25 and looks great in a G-string bikini and, lives at mum and dad's house still and doesn't pay rent or bills is calling herself a mindset coach because she just says, wake up and do it and manifest your results. And that's her whole mantra to mindset, and that habits are everything. But then you see their coaching style, you see their coaching feedback from clients. And it's like, I watched this recently, did a rant on it just the other day on Instagram because it pissed me off. One of the strategies someone used for someone craving food, and she shared this like it was a flex, was remove food from your house that you're craving, and it was something else, like just improve your habits, not the actual systemology of your habits and how that works as an interlooping system, and not the fact that you should embrace, more mindful exposure, acceptance strategies, understand hunger cues properly, learn why you want it. Are you including that food in your diet? This is just a general body composition client that she had, I'm guessing. Person just wants change in life, and she's like, just remove all the food from your house. And I was like, how do you have mindset in your fucking coaching system when your strategy go-to process is avoidance? Try telling a drug addict that avoidance is the answer to their problems. Try telling someone who's 400 pounds, who eats fucking 10 pizzas a day, the answer to their problems is avoidance. Good fucking luck. Get out of my system. Like, just get out of the field, because you should.
Right. Yeah. That kind of blows my mind, because at the most fundamental level, you're completely ignoring why we're having the cravings in the first place. Right. That's where my mind goes to. Why are you having that craving? Like, the amount of just like, well, just don't eat it. Like, just don't eat it is not coaching, or just do it is not coaching. It's mind blowing to me how much of that you get into, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can literally do I think I have done a fucking episode by myself just on a tangent about it because I was like,
Talking about
I just
that.
need to put this somewhere and just be angry about it because it shits me. Anyway, again, 41 interlooping fucking tangents and rants we're gonna have here. So let's take a backward step. I want to get into how you broke, given like you've got an educated background, you've got yourself into a pretty decent position. Then we get into the I guess the addiction period of your life, I guess that phase. Rather than harp there, because that shit gets low. Like understandably, that stuff's pretty hard. But my bigger question is, how do you get out of it? How do you go from that to them being someone who helps those people and someone who goes from like, look, I was here, I was down amongst this. I'm going to come out of it, because that's a bit like there are, I don't want to say two people, probably two or three types of people right in those situations. One who festers and burrows deeper. There's one who kind of looks at the nihilistic side and goes, look, there's not much I can do about it. I'd love to change. And that's where we have the pre-contemplation and contemplation. And then there's someone who actually takes steps and actions to getting past it and then go on to improve their life. So, you're obviously the latter, and you've gone through the stages. You've gone through pre-contemplation, contemplation. Like, look, I fucking need to do something here. How does that happen? How do you, because they're like, for lack of better terms and no soft language, they're fucking heavy drugs and substances to come off. So,
Yeah, 100%.
that takes some mindset. So how does that happen?
Yeah, and it really, for anyone who has never experienced addiction at that level, it's hard to even kind of explain the feeling, because it's not like it's not like you get off work and you think like, oh, I could go for a beer. It's like you need that. Need that. Your mind is telling you at that point that you need it for survival. That's how we're wired, right? At a certain point of addiction, your body's actually seeking that, like it's seeking calories to stay alive, right? Maybe even sometimes more than the calories you need to stay alive, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you get to that point, it is really difficult. But the thing for me was, what I'll talk about mainly what made the biggest impact for me as far as change, and that was service to others mainly. And I think I started that with my firefighting career, and then in coaching, and then in counseling, and then kind of bringing everything together with what I do just as an overall health coach here at Marek. And I think that first you have to learn, number one, you have to love yourself, and you have to value yourself. You can't, like you said, some people just wallow in that self-pity. And, of course I spent some time there doing that. Like, woe is me, right? Why do I have to have this issue? Whatever. But you kind of have to move past that. There is a little bit of kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and saying, like, I want to change.
Yeah.
And then you have to actively seek out the means to do so.
Yeah.
And the means to do so, for me, was, continuing my education, bettering myself, making sure I was in the gym, making sure I was eating right, making sure I was sleeping right, making sure I had goals, whether, they were small or large, having goals and things to work towards. If you idle hands are the devil's plaything, right? So you kind of have to make sure that you have things to reach out and kind of grab onto, as like, I want to achieve this, I want to do this great thing. Well, you can't do great things if you're involved in just your most hedonistic aspect of self, right? Self-actualization requires a little bit of stoicism and sacrifice. And I think that it's easy for me to talk about, because I love, and I'll say this, I wouldn't change any part of my life, even the lowest parts of my life now, because now, having had that experience, it gives me such a great opportunity to talk from a place where people that are going through that can trust you, or understand that, sometimes you might hear people say, like, well, you don't know what it's like. And it's like, well, I do know what it's like. So let me help you, and that fosters really great relationships. And people, man, just wanting to help other people, and then pursuing that relentlessly, I think, was what kind of pulled me into the place that I am in life right now.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Yeah, it's once you have a mission bigger than self, I think it becomes almost impossible not to act on it. And I think it's something like you talked about there. So like referencing like, there's several different great philosophers and psychologists that expanded on self-actualization, but acceptance strategies use it. The Buddhist monks used it. Maslow used it as his hierarchy of needs. Once we have the baseline of needs met and requirements met, the human is then able to move beyond the basic needs and is able to look at actualization of self, start looking for things spiritually, emotionally, missions in life, purpose, actually acting on those things. Like it becomes something you're capable to achieve. And unfortunately, a lot of people in general stop at the level just before self-actualization, kind of like that's my existence. Wake up at 5 a.m., go to work at 6 a.m. and I'm start work at 7 a.m. and I'm at home by 3 and I'm on the beer by 4. And it's like that as you were describing, one of the most powerful things that gets people through is having a sense of direction or goal orientation. What am I working towards? What's the next thing? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have, they just, it's something I picked up on quite heavily in America is the high school college route, right? Is like let's say you're the star quarterback, star running back, wide receiver, whatever it is, and you peak high school, college, doesn't transcend that to the NFL. Everything is yesteryear of, I was that guy who was state champions in 95 or, 86 or 2021 or whatever it was. And that becomes like their identity of their entire life, who they were, instead of going, well, okay, what's next? And every successful person I found or person that's overcome adversity or has that experience of obstacle has actualized a goal beyond what they used to do and look more to the future of what's to come and gone, this is where I need to go. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm here. The reason why it connects with me so easily is I did that exact process when I went through my spinal disability diagnosis and I went through my surgeries and procedures and I went through all the things I did, my depression. I was heavily addicted to Lyrica and Endep. My doctors were just prescribing that shit up in dose like it was, candy right. Going out of business. They're like, oh, it's not an addictive substance. I'm like, and now that I look back at it, I'm like, that's not how addiction works. It wasn't addictive in tendencies. It was addiction in dependence and tolerance. I needed more to get the same response. So that, they were like, oh, you're not going to go suck dick for this drug. I'm like, no, but in order to alleviate the pain and problems I had, I needed to use more. I think I started on my first diagnosis was 10 milligrams per night. I finished on 150 before I just stopped cold turkey. I was like, this is dumb. And it was for anyone understanding that, to take any drug, pain or neurological pain reduction, antidepressant, whatever it is, at 15 times the original dose, and to just go, you know what, fuck it, that was fucking horrible. The gut movements, the fucking skin irritations, the breakouts, the sensations and stuff, like nothing anywhere near as extreme as yourself and what that went through. But understanding to me, I was like, this isn't how I'm going to live the next 40, 50, 60 years. Like, that's not me. That's not what I'm going to do. What's the goal to get past this here? If pain is forever for me, if pain is constant, and that's now my new existence, well, then how do I manage that pain and get past it? Because everyone can sit in pain and exist in pain and go, oh, well, I've got a back injury. Like, great, that's cool. But you have a back injury at 21, you're going to spend the next 70 years with that back injury? Fuck that, right? Yep. So to me, I was like, that same process. I was like, once I identify the goal of where that's going, it was so much easier to go, oh, well, then fuck the drug. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to use that anymore. I need to get past that. So what's the next step? And I think it's such a powerful process that people don't appreciate. Like, you see coaches are like, oh, what's your SMART goal? Fuck that. If you give me a goal that's realistic, I tell you, like, you're already undervaluing yourself. Like, most people's perceptions, it's like when I talk to people about their reps in reserve and train intensity, you already don't know how to train hard as it is, let alone leave reps in the tank. Just find how to train fucking hard first. Imagine setting a goal based on the fact that you don't even know you can do anything and go, oh yeah, that's realistic. I can lose 5 pounds in 6 months. I can have you lose 5 pounds in 2 days. That's fucking nothing. Like, that's not a goal.
Right.
Set a real fucking goal where you're like, this is where I want to go with my life. And then I start to see people actually fucking succeed and they feel powerful about succeeding, right? Like you said, self-actualizing the process.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think the interesting thing is you kind of talked about undervaluing yourself, like people undervalue themselves when they're setting goals. I've always been like wildly unrealistic when I've set my goals.
Yep.
And I I almost, there's nothing yet that I'm not still working towards or haven't achieved, is what I've discovered. If you set those goals and you have milestones, right, you can't just say like I'm going to be Mr. Olympia and then not take the 500 steps between here and there and be Mr. Olympia, right? You can't just say I'm going to do this lofty thing. You can say like you can seed that in your head. I want to achieve this kind of lofty goal, and then start strategizing what the next week, the next month, the next year, the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, looks like. And once you set those pavers up and you start walking down that pathway, it gets easier, as you go and as those milestones fall. That's why I think it's really important to celebrate achievements and success that your clients have. Is even if it's a small one, like we reduce hemoglobin A1C from 5.4 to 5.2 or 5.3. I go like, hell yeah, man. Like, look, you did that. I didn't do that for you. Like you did that yourself. Like that is all you. This happened, this tangible thing. And that's why I like working with Marek, is because we use those hard data points in the blood work so frequently. You can't lie to me about how your diet has been, because I have those. I can see your lipids, I can see your blood sugar, I can see your fasting insulin, I can see where all these markers are at. And it prevents the client from lying to themselves too. Right. And I think that's such a powerful tool, man. And I'm really grateful to have it at my disposal now, because when you do start moving some of those things in the right way, like somebody has a family history of, cardiovascular disease, and, you move something like apolipoprotein B from 147 to like 92, and you're like, you're gonna not die as soon now, man. And you do the work to do that, like, good job. You're gonna be there for your kids 30 years from now because you got off your ass and you walked after your meals like I asked you to, and I didn't do the walking, you did the walking, so like, congratulations, you did the shit you were supposed to do and you got the result. Now let's move on to the next thing, right?
100%. And like that tangible check, like I call them checkpoints. And one of the like the ways I kind of quote it, I guess, is the reward of the goal at the checkpoint needs to be reflective of the size of the progress. So in order to maintain the dopamine and associated motivation levels and create that interlooping cycle that we know that exists between dopamine and motivation, which actually turns out to be more of an anticipatory response. People actually underrepresented what dopamine does for about 50 years. We can start to create the anticipation of that next checkpoint as a transmitter. And we say, okay, well, if that's what I got for that checkpoint, what's the next checkpoint? What's the next checkpoint? And you start to develop that anticipation of what's coming. So in order to make sure that we progress that consistently, that transmitter needs to be appropriated and received properly. So we need to set marker rewards in relation to the size of the checkpoint itself. So for me, it's like, when I get clients on stage, we go through a good season, I buy myself some Jordans. When, if I finish a grade or I finish my subjects and I pass my subjects, I'll get myself some Jordans. I might get myself some comic stuff. That level of reward is relative to the size of the result and the ambition that was undertaken. When I win a show, that's going to be bigger. That's going to be even bigger. That'll be, something more substantial because it took more substantial work. But what that does then is that incremental association of like, hey, you did this at this point and this required this much work. It's like if, the easiest way to example it would be, someone lost 10 pounds, so they go have like 50 pounds worth of fucking cake and ice cream and donuts. And it's like, that isn't a reward. That's a setback. We're going backwards here. Sure. The reward needs to be like, when I see people do like these, these group class challenges, and it's like end of group class night out, and they go get on the piss and sink all this food, and it's like, these massive catered events with all this takeaway and fun. I'm like, hang on, that is creating the loop that is the problem of their change. You need to actually make it something different, rewarding them with drugs, alcohol, food, fucking takeaway, dessert, and going, hey, you just lost 20 pounds in 5 weeks. You've put on 30 just from tonight. The fuck is that? So, the goal needs to be the reward, as you said, those checkpoints need to be rewarded and recognized so that the client goes, hey, that actually feels fucking good. I'm not just getting to the end and waiting for that outcome to reward myself. I'm seeing in the journey that there's little steps I can take to get rewards and feel good. And then it becomes anticipation of the next one and the next one, and we build that cycle of consistency. That to me is like the big process people don't appreciate. They set the massive goal and they'll reward it or look at it, but there's nothing along the way that's like, hey, this is also good.
Right. Yeah. I think setting up those checkpoints along the way is really important. And then also making sure that those things are really, really kind of set up in a way where you don't get into kind of like a backtracking mentality or worry about setbacks quite as much. I think that knowing that once you start setting up those dominoes to start falling, right, maybe you miss a mark here or there, that's not as big of an impact if you have all these little successes along the way, right? You just, if you take one step back here or there, it's not the end of the world. Don't catastrophize that. Just kind of stay the course, put the work in, get to the next checkpoint, boom, you get that reward. Keep going. Yeah, I think that's spot on.
Exactly right. Exactly. And yeah, it's definitely something I think people need to appreciate a little bit more. But again, another segue. Let's move into Marek Health, because again, it's a big part of how we connected and how we got into things and how we got chatting. A big part of Cav's introduction to me is like, you're gonna want to talk to these guys and Ali, and I'm like, all right, let's do it. I was like, put me in a room with people and I'll talk shit. And straight away we got started talking about like, I know you guys don't just do bodybuilding, which is again something else I want to separate and discuss. Is that I think because you're on like the More Plates, More Dates, you guys are sponsoring the Bro Chat podcast and sort of stuff, and Fuad's channel, everyone just kind of perceives it as like, oh, just bodybuilders do this. But we got talking across a field of clientele between bodybuilders, post health phases, post comp phases, and then moving into, just like we said, general behavioral change clients. Like people think body recomposition is either like you eat whatever you want, eat like shit, or you're fucking, you're Derek Lunsford who's like 2 weeks out from winning Mr. Olympia, that you're going to be so on point that nothing else matters, right? It's like there is such a spectrum, not a dichotomy there where we need to fit in. But yeah, like the Marek side of things, it interests me because we do have that perception that it's either all you do is bodybuilders and talk about drugs and that sort of thing, but they're more optimizing everything for the health aspect of what they're doing and what we do. And we, like, as a coach myself, I'm appreciative of the fact that that's important now. But how do you guys work with the general person? Like when a general person comes to you and they're just like, I want to get my blood work done and see what I'm up to. I did see the Fuad podcast, but I'm not a competitor. I just want to, get my health better or my hormones more optimized. How does that work? What does that look like? And what do you focus on with them?
Yeah, well, I think it's I think a lot of it is the same structure with a different expectation for for how strict things are going to be and how the adherence is going to be, right? Because if I'm coaching a bodybuilder and he's in prep for a show, I expect him to be spot on with everything. At that point, I shouldn't be coaching you to do the things you need to do, right? So I think that's the main difference between someone who's competitive with something and someone who comes from the general population. That's where you have to make that distinction, right? I'm not coaching you to do the things over here. If you come to me and you want to do a prep, then you better, like, whether it's cardio, whether it's your food, I don't care if you're full eat, whatever it is, whatever thing that the bodybuilder needs to do, they should be doing that on their own, like with very little need for me to motivate, right?
Agreed.
For general population, I think the biggest difference is realizing that they think they have to do what the bodybuilder does to get what they want out of the program, and that is absolutely not true. The amount of effort that it actually takes to get the average person somewhere where they go like, holy shit, look at these results. It's so small, man. It's so small. And so when someone first comes in for intake, what I really do is listen to them. Why did you come here? What kind of spurred you on to make the investment into coming to see me at Marek Health, right? Because there's some, it costs money, right? You have to, it costs money, it costs time. You're not necessarily going to hear things you want to hear about yourself, right? It's kind of it's a difficult thing. And that's where you said, like, they're already in that stage, right? They're past pre-contemplation. They're actually primed and ready to go by the time they get to me. So it's my job to figure out what brought them to me. Okay, now let's dig a little bit deeper and find out why you want to lose that 10 pounds. And I think Cav had a good point. He was like, do you want to lose 10 pounds so you can look better on the beach? Or do you want to lose 10 pounds because you want to be able to get up and play with your kid while you're at the beach, right? What's the real motivation? What's the driving factor behind you coming in to make that? And then let's make that thing a reality, as quickly as possible, because usually, like you said, people get afraid of making loftier goals. And so that first goal usually is something small like that. I want to lose 10 pounds so I feel better in this dress that I wore 3 years ago, or I want to be able to, pick up my kid, all these to play with my kid without being out of breath, like all these kind of things that are really just small, minor tweaks in daily behaviors, right? Somebody says, like, oftentimes I'll have people come to me and say, oh, I'm very tired, I'm very fatigued, and then I'll ask them how much they're sleeping, and they'll tell me 4, 5, 6 hours a night. And it's like, well, listen, buddy, like, we're going to change that first. We're going to prioritize that first, and then there's this tendency to say, like, oh yeah, get all this cardio per week, or get all this weight training per week. You can't take someone from not weight training to expecting them to weight train 5 days a week and not be blown out after 3 or 4 weeks. And so, I think, setting those steps out in the right places where we're going, like, okay, we're going to do, even if it's a full body workout once a week, even if it's just 10 minutes worth of walking after your breakfast and lunch, and you're going to get results from those things, because you take someone from doing nothing to literally just doing anything, you're going to see progress. And that's when we start to feed that feedback loop that we were talking about, right? Here's this checkpoint, success. Here's this checkpoint, success. And then those steps, then, you take them from a crawl to a wobble, to a walk, to a run. And then before you know it, they're sprinting down the driveway on their own, and you don't even have to tell them to do it, man. And that, I really think, is it's just like that saying, give a man a fish he eats for a day, you teach a man to fish he eats for a lifetime. And that's what you should be striving for as a coach, is getting these people to the point where they don't need you, right? Like, at the end of the day, you could say, you don't need me anymore, and they say, but I want you around because you made this possible. And then you have, I have a couple of people who I've been coaching for 7, 8 years now, and they don't need me anymore. I ask them things now at this point, right? I go like, hey, what do you think about this or that? And they're teaching me at this point. And that's where things get really satisfying. I think that should be the end game for all coaches, I think.
Yeah, I think we share a very similar philosophy there. Like, my approach has always been, I want to give you so much information and knowledge beyond just here's your program and your macros, that you eventually learn enough to say, I can step away whenever I want. And it's only when your next goal comes or gets more extreme, which often is the case, that you stick around because you want someone to guide you to that. But the baseline knowledge has been so imprinted and implemented that it's just second nature, non-negotiables. It's not even what people call neurotic, because they look from the outside in and they're looking through the viewing glass and they go, oh, that's hectic. That's so much stuff. But to the person doing it, we've spent so much time over time building up these general basic behaviors that it's just second nature. I'm not restricting your food. There's no gun to your head to get up and do your steps or your cardio or your training or your certain food intakes, or, diversifying vegetables and diversifying protein sources. It just happens. But to the outside person who eats, only 3 times a day, and one of them is a coffee and a croissant, and one of them is leftovers from the day before, they're looking at that and going, that's so neurotic and extreme, and that's drastic. And, well, hang on, hold up. That's not how you have to start. That I think is such a barrier of entry to change for people. They look at, us as bodybuilders. Is why I push so many coaches to stop coaching clients. Like you heard on my presentation, is to stop trying to coach clients like they're bodybuilders. More so take from bodybuilders and find what works for the client, because there is a lot of gold nuggets in the way bodybuilders live. There is, because they literally push
right.
their bodies to the most extreme size and condition humanly possible. So there's bound to be, you know, where success has been, there's a paved trail of knowledge, right? Like there's a map to that success. So we can take from that and go, look, let's dabble a little bit here. But I think when everyone sees on Instagram and the Instawebs and the social medias and YouTubes that this is how bodybuilders live and that's what gets the most attention, and coaches definitely don't know any better because they don't take the time to study and learn human behavior, they go, oh, well, I have to go chicken, broccoli, and rice for the next 6 years. I've been having pizza and donuts and ice cream and beer and wine for the last fucking 20 years. That's a pretty substantial change that I don't want to do. Reality is, like you said, we just go, hey, you're doing 5 pizzas a week. How about we start with 3 and maybe do a walk?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, let's maybe
3 pizzas and a walk.
Yeah, literally. Just let's cut that down. Instead of no walking and 5 pizzas, let's go meet me in the middle, 3 pizzas and 1 walk. Sweet, I can do that. Cool, fantastic. Guess what? You're now in a deficit because you've been eating 5 pizzas a week for fucking 20 years. Like, it's just understanding that side to me is so much more rewarding because the way I preamble someone's prep is I make sure that, like, you know, because I'm sick and tired of prep being this, I don't know what it's like in America. And again, it'd be a really good segue for America and how you guys approach things with those elite bodybuilders. But prepping in Australia is almost like this glamorized experience, which to me is the most dangerous approach to such a drastic extremity. Like, you don't go from playing park flag football, what you guys would call flag football, to playing NFL overnight. You don't just go, I caught a ball once, I'm going to be a fucking wide receiver, because you would literally get broken in half and hurt. But we go, oh, I've dieted for 6 weeks, I'm going to do a physique prep. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? The gap in between that is so extreme. You have no optimal behaviors, no lifestyle management, no health management, no protocols in place to control yourself emotionally, psychologically, physiologically. You're just like, I'm going to do that thing now. And to me, it's such a bullshit approach, because most of my athletes, we've spent 6 to 12 months building up their life to be in a position where not only is their training good and their body's in a decent position to prep, their food intake is at a high enough level, but also their relationship with food, their relationship with their friends and family, their environment's been optimized, their circle's been narrowed down to people that are supportive and constructive. They've got goals, but also like their health behaviors are in place, their sleep is on point, their nutrition's on point, steps and the non-negotiables, cardio when I tell them to, they understand how to cut and bulk and go through certain calorie ranges. All of that takes time and been built up. So then I can go, okay, now we've got all that down pat, now we prep. Because that is where you optimize those things and get it right. If you throw someone from fucking 0 to 100 and go, hey, guess what? You barely sleep 6 hours, we're prepping. Like, what the fuck?
Right. Yeah, no, and I think Stan Efferding says it the best. If you want to be healthy, don't compete. I think that's probably, and I agree with that to an extent. I think that, there's kind of some happy mediums in there some places for some people, but in general, I think the last thing I would ever do is glorify a prep. That's the terrible experience for anyone who's ever been through it. It's not the most fun thing to do, right? You're at that point, you're taking your habits and the things that you've built and the discipline that you've built, and you're putting it to that's one of the things that people don't understand. You're putting it to the extreme. That's the max. That's the highest level you can do, is you're trying to come in as big as you can, as full as you can, as lean as you can, as conditioned as you can, like all these factors, all these variables, you're trying to do to your body something that 99.999% of people are never going to experience, and honestly don't have the fortitude to actually see out through to the end, because it's a mentally draining process. It's a psychologically draining I would say the psychological aspect of prep is the most difficult one.
I agree.
When you get down towards those last couple of months when things are really starting to tighten up. And I think that people think that they have to do that just to look good on the beach or
exactly,
or look good in their wedding photos. And it's like, listen, man, we're not even getting probably a quarter of the way down that path for you to get where you want to go. And I think that's the misconception that these glorified Instagram pages like, oh, I'm in prep, I'm grind, every day's a grind, everything's hard, I just wake up and do it anyway. That is such a deleterious mentality to have for people that it's actually, I think that the intent is good by some of these influencers to go out there and say like, just fucking get up and do it. And it's like, okay, I agree. But I'm also in the place of coming from doing some real hard shit in my life and not being afraid to get in the mud again, right? For someone who's never done that, that makes them go like, I don't know if I'm even going to take the first step down that path because it's so extreme. And I think separating those things is going to make a big difference for people. Like, in my experience with Marek, you have a bunch of people come in that are expecting, the expectations are kind of set in a certain way for how to achieve the goals that people come into me to achieve. And I have to basically tear down like the last 20 years of social media influence they've had down to the foundation to get them to understand what they actually need to do to achieve the things that they want to achieve. And I think that it would be a lot more helpful for people to start putting out information like this, like we're doing right now, and telling you like, it's not that you can't have pizza, it's that you can't have pizza 6 nights a week. Maybe you have some salmon and some rice and some asparagus one night, just one night, something, something simple like that, right? Just something. And that's one of the biggest things is I think people think that they can't enjoy food while they're improving their body composition or while they're, trying to get stronger or while they're, trying to lean out. I think people think that they can't enjoy food. I enjoy food. I'm sure you enjoy food. And, one of the things that you have to learn is how, if you don't know how to cook for yourself and you're past the age of, I don't know, maybe 17, 18, you probably need to figure that out. And I think that once you start to understand, and you have to teach people too, because if people don't know, if someone asks you if rice is a carbohydrate, is a good protein source, then you probably need to dumb it down a little bit and help them understand the most basic things, right? What is a protein source? What's a fat source? What's a carb? What's a source of carbohydrate? Like people thinking peanut butter is a protein source is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my life. And you'll see all these like, fit posts where it's like, oh yeah, my peanut butter in my shake. And it's like, why are you doing that? Like that's not what you want in there right
I've seen
now.
those good fats,
Yeah. I don't know about that.
Yeah. And it's fucking true, man. Like something else that I mentioned in the summit, it was, we get these nuances and these dichotomies of these coaching pages. And I get it's up to the person individually to choose what they follow, but we get people even beyond the average client, like the intermediate to advanced athlete. We have people talking about these nuances of like, what is the best rep at this range and what is the best blah, blah, blah. And it's like such 0.5% moot point data where they're like, no, this leverage mechanism here is better at this position here. We should lengthen the bicep at this position. Motherfucker, just people, like most of you don't even know how to train hard. You're talking about percentages and ranges of movement mechanics when you don't even know how to train to a full fucking rep with intensity and control. Before you go worrying about how to try and make it easier or shortened or lengthened or whatever other nuance you want to create, 99% of you who think you're an advanced bodybuilder are barely an intermediate. And that's not an insult. That's a common reaction that you should understand. This idea that people want to rush to being like advanced people and they still look at, and like you said, 99.9% of the world are not bodybuilders, nor do they even understand the data. And we're trying to like all these coaches are creating content to outsmart each other and debate this most basic shit. Like, sure, go have a round table, have that discussion. But the majority of people that are struggling to enter this game, and who do you follow? Oh, I follow Menno and I follow this guy and I follow Lane. And I follow. Okay, cool. That's some good stuff. If you're at that level of knowledge, you need to understand. But what are you doing to start that knowledge? Okay. Like I said, you got people who don't understand what a protein source is, or what a carbohydrate is, or what a vegetable is. Like they're having one serve of lettuce and going, I've got my fiber intake for the week. Like we're so far from the optimal level that these, coaches seem to think we're currently at. Like because you train 6 days a week, do 12,000 steps a day every day, sleep 10 hours a night, and have no bills to stress about, and you've got a fucking successful online business, does not mean that 99% of your clients are at that same position. They are probably so far worse than you understand, but they're just saying yes because they don't want to sound stupid. We need to have that, like, the way I've kind of worded is meet the client where they're at and raise them. Like we can't set the standard, the standard can't be, I'm at fucking, 100% knowledge. You need to be here to work with me. That's bullshit. That's absolutely bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be down here in the trenches with them, meet them, have that perspective from like when we started out, when we were at the beginning of our careers and our journeys and everything we were doing, and go, what did I not know? Because that's likely where my client is. Even if you want an elite bodybuilder, there's still points in time where they need to know stuff that they probably don't know. They just simply don't, because they're just meatheads.
A good example of that to me is, I remember when I was first started out, bodybuilding, powerlifting, just wanting to look good, to be strong, and help other people do the same thing. I thought I had to eat fucking sweet potatoes for so long, like I don't know what it was. Maybe this is like early 2000s, late 2000s, something like that. But I remember, like, you read like Men's Health or Muscle and Fitness, and you think you
gotta
think
have yam and
you
tilapia.
get these kind of, you get this like kind of weird ingrained sense of what you're supposed to do, and then you do it and it doesn't work for you, and you wonder why it doesn't work for you, and it's because you're doing some cookie cutter like plan that was made for someone who's on a an extreme amount of gear, who is like dedicated to just suffering with the amount of cardio that they're doing, probably for that photo shoot for that magazine that you just that you just read. And I think that meeting people where they are 100% is a principle across so many different disciplines when it comes to counseling and coaching and teaching in general. What we kind of lack the awareness of the fact that we're teachers at the very most base level. We're teachers, and that is a lot of responsibility, right? You can't throw someone in a calculus class if they haven't taken algebra 1, right? And I think that the way to get people there is by having those conversations and making sure that they have the understanding of what you're even telling them, right? Because you can get on. Sometimes I like to hear myself talk, and I have to make sure that when I'm talking with clients that I'm not just enjoying listening to myself talk and sounding smart, right? I have to, you have to focus on what their needs are and where they are, and then guide them slowly into the understanding that they need to have. And I think that's one of the things that you had said at the coaching summit, as well as meeting people where they are, right? And that's kind of been the underpinning variable that we've talked about in different ways all the way through, right? Is where is this person at?
Exactly.
What thing can we change here to actually start moving in the right direction?
Yeah, it's a very simple method. We learn in a famous Russian developmental psychologist actually created it. It built the underpinning of Western education as he left the Soviet Union. That's Vygotsky, and he developed what's called the Goldilocks zone and scaffolding. So, in the sense of like meeting with someone where they are, if I start talking about optimization of protein intake and protein spacing, and what is a more fast digestible carbohydrate pre-training versus post-training to maximize insulin response and things like that, and this person doesn't even know what the fuck a carbohydrate is. I start talking about sugar molecules and like, sugar's bad for you and blah, 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 all this crap. And they're just like, what the fuck is a carb? Like, what are you talking about? I thought carbs were like, I cut out my pizza and donuts. Like, no, that's just because it's a highly palatable, multi-macro based food. That's separate. But if I start talking to them like that, then all of a sudden this information becomes too hard to comprehend. They lose interest. They have no motivation. There's no excitement to understand it because it's so far out of their radius. Instead, what we need to look at is finding that Goldilocks zone where it's just right at their knowledge, hard enough that they can actually implement it. Like, hey, look, you are hitting 3,000 steps a day because you work at a desk. The research is quite clear that evidently people become less morbid and live healthier, longer lives if they move at 7,000 to 10,000 steps. The evidence is pretty clear on that across the board, multifactorially, multiculturally. It's pretty clear. move a little bit more, you probably live a little bit longer. Okay, so you're at 3,000 steps a day just at your desk and you eat all this shit. Let's start with 6,000. I just want you to get to 6,000 because that's going to be a struggle. That's double what you've been doing. So let's expose you to that. They get to 6,000, like, oh, fuck, I feel a bit healthier. I feel like my weight's come down. Yes, it has. Now we're going to hit that 7 to 10, but also we're going to include space in your protein a bit more. That means a couple of meals of chicken or a beef or a lean ham or some eggs, whatever you choose that protein. Here's a list of them, put it in. Okay, cool. Oh, now I'm recovering from gym a bit better. I feel better. I'm a lot more satiated because protein's higher in satiation. They don't need to know that, but we just know. And now all of a sudden they have 3 or 4 skills that they've built and we've just added on top of, rather than being like, here's everything at once. Fuck you, piece of shit. You should just know what it is. That to me is the funner part, right? Like when I build a base client from like entry level to now I'm ready to prep, or now I'm ready to powerlift, or now I'm ready to, I've got guys doing SAS training. Now that I'm ready to do that stuff, like they didn't start there. They were like, what's that next extremity I can go to? Well, we've optimized all these things. Let's move here. But again, it's like that scaffolding has to occur where you've built that level, now you scaffold up, build that level, scaffold up. And that's like the key to coaching, is that educational process like you talked about. But people don't seem to grasp that as coaches. They're just like, oh, here's your macros and data, go nuts. Like, cool.
Right.
Cool. What does that mean? What is that? What counts as a vegetable? I had a client ask me like, oh, do you count potato as a vegetable? And I'm like, no. In this sense, we're looking at cruciferous vegetables, different color spectrums. We're looking for higher fiber content. Include fruits and berries and stuff as well. I was like, okay, cool. I was just thinking the potato count, and I'm like, okay, that's a mistake by me. I could have met you a little bit lower. I now know that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting stuff, man. I think it's very curious to kind of learn how to, and that's where that motivational interviewing process kind of comes in when you're first meeting with people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to really dig into, you can get people to talk, and it's very difficult to manage not to just get yes or no answers. Getting people to actually talk about things is where you're gonna learn about them, and that's one of the more invaluable things that come from the like counseling side of things. Is I have to figure out what's going on with you, so I have to get you to talk to me. And I think that's one of the things that in the health space is going to do. All of the really great doctors that I work with, one of the things that they're really, really good at is getting the person to express their symptoms, express the reasons that they, express those reasons that they came in, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. And then a lot of the time during the appointment, I'm like, well, you didn't tell me that. And it's because the doctor that I'm working with is working on such a high level of understanding how to get people to open up about those things, where I'm just like, okay, cool. Well, that makes so much more sense for all these other data points that I collected from this person. You tell me this one variable over here, and then all of a sudden all of this makes sense, right? All of these things that you have going on just got busted wide open, and we know which variables we need to manipulate now. So
yeah, it's definitely an undervalued skill that I think a lot more coaches need to pay attention to. But let's finish on with something with some of the funner side of things, the more taboo stuff that Marek, I guess, does get to work into, and that is looking at bodybuilding, because that is part of my coaching process and part of heavily of what you guys do as well. Something that's excited me recently is the harm reduction involvement that's going on now in bodybuilding. Forever it was just a matter of just throw everything at the kitchen sink and see what happens, right? Like, I had people tell me that like experience trumps knowledge, because age is not. I would choose someone with experience over age because they've been there and used it. And I was like, hold the phone. The amount of people that I know that exist in the bodybuilding world where experience for them was just taking every drug under the sun, not checking their blood work, not checking their health markers, not checking anything, that age old, like, cardio, is that Spanish? I don't do that. Like, all these things that people do that were literally killing themselves and going, oh, that's just what it takes to be a bodybuilder. Now we're starting to see this almost this surge. I don't want to say a reemergence because it never really took off, but actually now this surge, or almost like an enlightenment period in the health of bodybuilding, where we're going, actually, you know what? With better structured stack design and health mediations and interventions here, and here, we can have you train harder, train longer, compete longer, be healthier, and live longer, not just take everything and, shoot yourself in the foot and then die.
Right. Well, and unfortunately, you see a lot of these younger bodybuilders kind of blow themselves out early. You see guys from 18 to 21 go from just starting out to being these mass monsters, and you wonder how that happened. I guarantee you it didn't happen in a fashion that's going to, keep their heart healthy for another 70 years. And I think that one of the really cool things that I've been seeing with, I have some friends who are pretty high level bodybuilders who are kind of starting to hit their stride and find their success. And they're all closer to my age than they are their early 20s.
Yep.
These guys are in their mid to late 20s, even early 30s, some of them, where they're starting to win bigger shows and they're starting to, move into the pros and things like that. And it's cool to see because I've watched those guys grind out the heavy reps, do the heavy lifting, do the dieting, do the show, do the smaller shows, take advantage of the rebound out of the show to grow, doing all these different things where they can actually build the experience to be successful, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just, I'm going to take 5 grams of gear in every oral under the sun and, hope that my liver and my kidneys hold up long enough for me to win a show that matters. And I think it's promising, man. A lot of guys that I have come in, they'll already be doing things to control their blood pressure. They'll already be doing things to control their lipids. They're already paying attention to their liver markers, their kidney markers, the things that can get kind of screwed up when you're using some of these exogenous hormones. And I think that that is really cool to see in comparison to even just a couple of years ago, looking at, because I've looked at blood work for a long time, even before I was with Marek, and looking at people's blood work then compared to now, and me having not even talked with them about it yet and see things be much, much better than they used to be. I think that's really cool. And I think that is a responsibility of the people who are very visible in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
I believe it's your responsibility to say, like, people always want to hear about, what cycle are you on? What drugs are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, you want to hear about what I'm taking? Let's talk about, telmisartan. Let's talk about
Yeah.
ezetimibe. Let's talk about taking a statin if my if things get too out of control on my lipid panel. Let's talk about nebivolol. Let's talk about all the boring stuff, because that's what really matters. At the end of the day, the drugs are easy, when it comes to the actually building the tissue and the anabolic side of things. Cool. There's like a handful of things that you might employ, and then that's pretty much it for most people, right?
Yep.
And so, getting into the other side of things, like how do we maintain these other variables for my health long term? Because you only get better, older bodybuilders look better. Their muscle density is there. The separation, when their conditioning is dialed in, you can see the difference between a young guy and a veteran, right? You put them on stage next to each other and you can see the difference if you're seasoned at looking at those people, right?
Yep.
And so I think it's really important to get the ear of the younger guys and say, like, if you want to look your absolute best, if you want to be the best bodybuilder possible, you need to be doing this 10 years from now, man.
Yes.
And the only way to be doing this 10 years from now is to be alive. So let's focus on the things that are going to keep you that way, right?
Allow your body to actually, sustain the work you're about to put it through. Like, and again, it's something that people don't comprehend is the delayed gratification of bodybuilding is people struggle to look at 10-year plans or 10-year goals or like those 10-year processes and go, that's something I want to work towards because it's so boring. Like what can I do in the next 6 to 12 months, put on 20 or 30 pounds of stage weight? No. The average return, I think, even if you look at Nick Walker, been competing since he was 18, 16, and he's now 26. He has a 10-year career and he's been using for a long time of that. His rate of return only works out to be like 4 kilos per year, which is still 40 kilos of actual stage mass, but 4 kilos per year is not substantial. It's substantial over time, over mileage. You add that up. But if you look at that year to year, that's not a drastic increase from like, the average, or it is from the average person, but for most people, like you say, oh, I've only put on 4 kilos of muscle this year. And they're like, oh, that's pretty whatever. But you stack that over 10, 15 years. Now that's fucking huge. Like say you're an 80 kilo man starting out lean, you've added 20 kilos 80 pounds of stage mass, nearly 100 pounds of stage mass in that time for that 10 years. That's a lot of fucking weight and size. But you've got to be able to look at that journey, that long distance, like Samson Duata. He's 37, 38, coming to the peak of his career, competing now for the top 3 position. He's arguably going to be Mr. Olympia. That didn't happen at 27 or 26 for him. He took, like, yeah, he was competing. I think his first pro show was like 2015. And he'd been competing since he was 20, since 2013, 2011, or something like that. That's a 10 to 12 year chunk of time to get to the point now where he's taken off as an overnight success. But that journey has to be looked at. We go, well, how do we get there now? Well, we can see, are you using telmisartan? Are you doing things to reduce and control blood pressure? Are you doing things physiologically, like doing your cardio 2 to 3 to 4 times a week in a certain blood point, heart rate radius to keep that in check? Are we keeping our fasted blood glucose and our blood sugar levels down? Are we keeping that in control? What food sources are you using? Are we making sure we're getting the right DHA to EPA fucking ratio so you're getting the good fats in for health, and also diversifying protein sources, not just turning to fucking pizza and burgers? All these things that we can do, even in off seasons, where it's like, it's not just for everything in the kitchen sink, right? Like, it needs to be structured and conscious for the long journey. Like, we're not looking from you leaving the port and going, oh, let's just fucking send it on the boat and go as fast as we can. Motherfucker, we've got a 6-month journey to the destination. That's going to take a long time to sail. Let's take our time with it and go into the wind properly and fucking, flow the seasons. But like you said, we get some young kids that come up and just go, well, I've watched Chris Bumstead now on YouTube for 3 years. I'm going to take everything under the sun and I want to be him. Okay, he's also 35, 36 and been doing this, or whatever, he's 34 now or something, and doing this a fair while. Like, looking at blood markers, looking at your blood work, looking at your health panels, at your health actions to do this forever. Like, yeah, again, tangents, just stuff that shits me. But we look at bodybuilders and you'll see guys do like, here's a day in the life of me eating. And it's chicken and rice, beef and rice, some sort of oats. Nothing in there is like antioxidation. Nothing in there is vegetable or fiber movement. Nothing in there is like insoluble and soluble fibers. There's not a diversity of the color spectrum of fruit and veg. Like, there is so many other ways we can optimize your health to last in bodybuilding that goes just beyond drugs. But it's like that stuff that needs to be, we need to have those conversations, right? These conversations have to happen so people go, I can be healthier and a bodybuilder.
Well, I think it's important to say that to be the best bodybuilder possible, you have to be as healthy as possible. There's no way that you can be as good as you can be in the sport of bodybuilding if you feel like shit all the time. And I know so many bodybuilders who just feel like garbage all the time.
Yep.
And I think that's super important for us to bring up. If you feel poorly most of the time, you are doing it wrong.
Yes.
That's just what it comes down to. I mean, a healthy, happy person is always going to be able to achieve more. And even going into things like making sure people are maintaining like their personal relationships. I know so many guys who have been in like long-term relationships and then they get into a serious prep and all of a sudden, their girlfriend leaves them and, they're not talking to their friends anymore and all that kind of stuff. I think the mental health side of things is probably pretty important too, but that's a whole nother tangent.
But I mean, even looking like, again, it's people not understanding the psychosomatic relationship, how important it is. If you are stressed, if you're emotionally drained and damaged and you're messing up relationships and you're not relaxing properly, you're not stimulating parasympathetic vagus nerve reactions, then it's going to impact stress and cortisol. Stress and cortisol is going to impact digestion. That's one of the pathways that gets shut down when we go through a high stress fight or flight response. The body shuts down and increases cortisol, which decreases metabolism and breakdown and digestion of food. The body doesn't prioritize when you're running from a fucking tiger that you should digest food and shit properly. That's not its concern. So if you're in a heightened state of stress and arousal because you're emotional and worked up and you're pissing on your missus, or she, a female, if she's in prep and she's pissing all over her husband and making things worse for herself, that is going to impact the process then or system of recovery, of training, of growth, because the body isn't prioritizing muscle protein synthesis during the escape from a fucking mammoth that, you're supposed to be running from 10,000 years ago. That's what we perceive stress as. Right. That's what's the same system. So if we're going through that process and you're just like, oh, fuck everyone who didn't, if you're not with me, you're against me and blah, 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 and all the other cool bro shit that everyone comes up with when they think they're a hard ass. All of those things and those processes, if we're not looking at that, even from the blood work point of view, high cortisol levels, high C-reactive proteins, high degrees of inflammation. You're not going to be digesting like foods efficiently. Transport proteins aren't going to be working effectively. You're not metabolizing and moving those foods through the tract efficiently. The stomach won't be digesting. You start to get food ulcers. You start to get waist problems because you can't go to the bathroom effectively. All that shit impedes your ability to grow muscle. It's not just take the drugs, eat the food, build mass. It's also how is this body as a system optimized inside that blood work and mentally to go, it can process and handle everything you're doing. Because if that isn't in place, right, if that stuff isn't working effectively, then you're almost wasting time. Like, yes, calories in versus calories out, but if it isn't working to optimize those calories, there is going to be a struggle point.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree with that.
It's just it's a wild concept to me that people kind of, they like, there's weird flex that I want to make preps harder than it needs to be, or my life harder than it needs to be, because then I get to say that it was a hard time and I overcame and had this big speech on stage about adversity and blah, blah, blah. You know what? I want the easiest fucking prep possible because it means everything's working. Like, it means my heart rate is in the place I need to be when I need to sleep. I know that my adrenaline's where it is when I'm training. I know that my cortisol level's where it is when I rise in the morning, but I also know that my melatonin kicks in at night and I'm sleeping. I know that my body's processing, digesting food. My blood health markers are in check. Yes, I know my ALT and AST is going to be slightly elevated because I'm taking exogenous hormones. My creatinine's probably going to be a bit higher because I'm training fucking hard and breaking down tissue. Those things, I'm expecting that those are going to be slightly up, but they're in radius of what's normal for what we do. All of these extra things, if I add shit on to make it harder, and I can't go to the amount of people I see drop out of preps because of like digestion issues, bloating issues, diarrhea, like all this stuff. And you're like, that isn't like, yes, it's kind of more normal in prep, but that shouldn't be happening. It's because somewhere along the way in this process, this journey, you fucked up somewhere. Something like you weren't taking consideration these consequences and these areas, right? And I think that's something that people get a lot wrong is like, oh, my prep was hard. That like I'm harder because of it. It shouldn't have been that hard. You made it that hard and fucked it up.
Right. Yeah. I don't understand the whole wanting to make things harder thing, because it does seem like you get some cool points for, kind of putting out there like, oh, it's a grind and it's a struggle. It's like, what part of your process is screwed up that you're struggling or that it's hard? Like, why is that glorified? Because to me, if your coach is doing his job, you're doing your job, everybody's kind of vibing and things are the way that they're supposed to be, it should be like, yeah, man, it's going to suck to be in a calorie deficit. It's going to be hard to put in the amount of work that you need to put in when you're tired, all that kind of stuff.
100%.
But that's all stuff that people go through every day in their regular lives with their regular jobs. You know what I mean? You're just choosing. And then the other thing too that I always think is funny is like, you chose to do it. Like, why bitch about it if you chose to do it? At the end of the day, it's 100% your decision that you wanted to go do this hard shit to get this result that you wanted. And at the end of the day, I think like, I'm very careful to kind of make sure to support and motivate people, but sometimes you just have to tell them to not be a little bitch and just put in the work at the same time, right?
It's something you'll appreciate. I think I get scorned a little bit over here by some people because I go pretty extreme with it. But when I hear people like complain to me about, and not so much complain, but there's general points in time I'm like, look, I comprehend that you're hungry. I get it. I've been there. I do it myself. I understand. It is fucking a struggle. But when it's like this incessant complaining and like, oh, fucking this restriction, it's this, I can't do anything with my friends and blah, blah, blah. Look, motherfucker, you chose this hard, but at the same time, right? Yes, you're in a deficit. Yes, it's exhausting, it's tiring, you're hungry. I get that. But at any point in time, you can quit. You know who couldn't quit? The fucking siege of Leningrad, dudes were eating 800 calories mixed with sawdust and shit, literal human feces, in order to sustain the battle to fight for their country and prevent the people they love from being killed by the Nazis. I don't know if we can say that word anymore on the internet, but I'm going to say it anyway. That is a different level of hard that you can't comprehend. But when you have that perspective, and it's a neat little segue to like my love of World War II and like just history in general for perspective, you can take from that and go, oh, look, this was pretty fucking hard. My hard is a choice. I can quit whenever I want. They didn't have the choice to quit. If they quit, they died. And like that to me is such a whole different level of life and struggle and resilience that me complaining about food is a moot point. It's not even like, I'll tell my coach, like, look, motherfucker, when does this dig end? I want some more carbs because I want to train. But That's from a place of like, I'm just being a bitch. Not so much like, oh, you don't understand my struggle and it's fucking hard for me. Yes, of course it's fucking hard, but at the same time, you can quit whenever you want.
Right, right. Yeah. I've been into I've been doing a lot of listening about I'm moving into like Korea and the Korean War and Vietnam War, and some of the things that those guys went through there with like the supply lines and supply chains and what they were eating and how they were surviving. And it's like at the end of the day, I think people that's another reason that I'm really into history, is because if you want to understand struggle, look at the strife that has kind of occurred throughout human history, and I think war is the best way to look at that, right?
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, um, when the when the opposing side decides it's a scorched earth policy and there's not a living animal for 300 miles in any directions, and you're living off of sea rations for however long, right?
Yep.
Then maybe you can complain, right?
Yep.
But until we get to that point, like eat your rice and try to enjoy yourself, right?
Hey, like, I think I remember reading some research on it. The average lifespan of a second lieutenant in a general firing squad in Vietnam was like 11 seconds. Like that level of adversity is something you can't even compare to with being like, oh, you don't understand my struggles. Bro, you go to the gym every day in a safe environment with air conditioning, and you choose to eat less food over time, but still have the option to eat whatever you want, and you have quality protein sources, and you can literally sleep at night every night safely. That's not the same. That is not struggle. It's a struggle, but it's not struggle.
Right. Yeah. I think that's one of the things too. That's why I tried to challenge myself early on in a lot of my life experiences to do some harder things, like
Yeah.
you know, uh, like being on the fire line for 24 hours, being away from home for months
Yeah.
at a time, sleeping 4 hours a night for weeks and weeks and weeks in a row, sleeping
Yeah.
literally next to a burning fire. There's a fire right here, and I'm sleeping on my pack right here, hoping the guy next to me doesn't fall asleep, who's supposed to make sure we don't burn to death. Like hoping that guy who is also tired as shit doesn't fall asleep while I'm trying to sleep over here. And you've got like a sandwich that's been in your pack for 18 hours, and that's what you got to run off of. Go get them. I think it's important to I think it's important for people to challenge themselves to do hard things, because what I was getting at is I think difficulty is a matter of experience and perception.
I agree.
So the harder things that you put yourself through, the easier things that are difficult in the future will be for you to push through. And I think that it doesn't always have to be, for somebody who thinks that being in a calorie deficit is one of the more difficult things that they've ever done. Maybe it is, for maybe some people, they're experientially, this is the hardest thing that they've ever done. I think that's an important perspective to keep too, along the meet people where they are train of thought. And but that's where you start doing, going back to that scaffolding that you were talking about, is like, okay, being in a calorie deficit is super hard. Let's get through a couple of months of that, even if it's just minor, and then let's keep increasing the difficulty for people, because I think that's you know that's when you look at, like, I don't know if you know who Colonel David Hackworth is, but he started out in Trieste post World War II. And he had lied and told his recruiter that he was 18. He was 15 at the time, and he hired a homeless guy to pretend to be his dad. He bought the homeless guy a bottle of wine and had the homeless guy come down and sign him up. So he missed World War II, but he went through Korea and he went through Vietnam. And then he actually became a little bit more of a pacifist towards the end, kind of like the reasons we were fighting a lot of our wars post World War II, at least, were kind of bullshit. And I think that's probably been the case for a lot of wars. Like I look back at World War II. That's one of the reasons that I really like that time period in history, is because that was, to me, the last period of, like, we're fighting over morals, and we're fighting over beliefs, and we're fighting over things that how do we want the world to be? And that is why I put so much emphasis in my learning into World War II on its own, because everything since then is kind of been a lot more highly politicized. The politics were pretty simple back then. It was good versus evil, right? When we were at that point, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. In as simpler terms as it is, there was literally a case of like, even in America's isolationist period, and it was going through that whole process where it was like America's like, we're under lock and key, we're away from everyone, don't come near us, we're going to focus on doing us and rebuilding after World War One and the economic collapse. And then Europe's involved in this, Britain's getting its ass kicked, but they're not. They're also like, they're still heavily involved in fighting back. France is being flogged. That whole period then was basically like, the world needs to stop this evil thing happening in the middle of Europe, because these guys are pretty fucked. And the funny part is that the crazy part to me is people don't even understand that we didn't actually understand about the death camps and the enslavements and the relocations until after the fact. That like, we have this really easy hindsight now to go, oh yeah, that was wrong. But people didn't know what was happening at the time. There was, falsified data, there was fake press conferences, there was falsified, almost like misdirection by the propaganda agencies in Germany to hide it all, what was happening. So people were like, oh no, it's not a big deal. And the Churchills rose up and were like, actually, you know what? We actually need to step up and do something. This is getting ridiculous. And luckily he managed to take office, because I always forget the prime minister before him basically allowed a certain German leader to carry on his ways for as long as possible before he did. I'm like, no, they'll calm down. They'll relax. We told them there's a sanction. They'll stop. France gets their ass kicked. Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Rhineland all gets flogged. And then it's like, okay, there's a clear bad guy here. We all need to kind of be involved in this. Even Australia gets dragged into, we're in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. And the Commonwealth is like, hey, we're calling on everyone. Guess what? You're coming over here. Cool. We're going over there now. Like, there was a clear point in time where it was good and evil, and everyone's involved in stopping that. Even to the point where literally dichotomous political economic beliefs, communists and capitalists, are like, hey, we should probably fight that guy together. That's a pretty bad guy. We should stop that. There was pretty clear-cut lines at this point in 1937 to 1945. That was a bad dude. And then after that, it's like everything becomes like politicized, and we just want to stop the Red Menace, and these guys stop and calm down and whatever.
And what's so funny to me about that too is, without Russia, man, how do things turn out if Stalin doesn't throw 30 million Russian soldiers on the against the Germans? You know what I mean? It's funny, as an American, we have like a pretty inflated sense of self when it comes to that war, when there were so many other parties that took huge casualties and huge loss of life and lifestyle. It's like, it's funny to me, we pretty much immediately go into like a fighting stance with Russia after that, considering they're like probably the linchpin of what actually allowed us to be able to fight back against the Germans in the first place, which is super interesting to me, that as soon as the dust settles, it's right back to same old with the geopolitics. It cracks me up. It's like we never learn anything. Like everything going on in like with Russia and Ukraine and like I don't know what the hell we're doing. Like we keep sending Ukraine money like hand over fist, and it's like, are we going to involve ourselves in this or what? What is this weird kind of like, we're not really doing anything, but we are. And
it's like some proper, the same thing that happened in Nam, where it was like, we're going to send some, what did you guys call it? Some advisors. We'll send some advisors and we'll train you up. They're CIA operatives. Oh, now we're going to send some special platoons in. They're fucking elite special forces. Oh, now we're going to send the 7th Fleet. Oh, now we're going to start landing some forces in. Motherfucker, what? Like, that's not just advising. You've literally just invaded. Justifiably, right. But like, you guys are like, there's advising, and then it's like, hey, we're going to graduate this to a full land expedition force.
and I see that happening eventually. There's either going to be a resolution, or we're going to end up with like just a shit ton of people there, and I don't think it's going to be pretty for anybody. But I guess we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I'm too old to get drafted now, I think, so I'll just be here, like, right,
I think
causing a
my
ruckus
spinal
and
disorder
yelling
stops
about
me
shit.
from being useful.
Yeah, that's good. We can just bitch about it on the podcast.
It's definitely a one thing I notice is like you guys as Americans, your pride not only goes to the national level, but it inversely goes right down to the local level. Like your pride of your local county, your community, your state, your university, your side of the coast, then to like when it's like a global geopolitical geo engagement, like to the national level, the international level, like you said, talking about the win of World War II, the amount of people who I don't understand that Russia was the ones to get in, or the Soviet Union were the ones to actually reach Berlin first and lock that down and win that battle, to the point that like the Patton was stopped and said, hey, you guys, the Third Army, guess what? You stop here because the Russians are coming. And if you go any further, you're going to fight. And they're probably going to win at this point. So these two massive Russian armies coming in from like north and south, those guys get Berlin and they get Germany. And that's what's going to happen. Like the amount of people that don't actually understand that's how it finished. And they're like, oh yeah, but America saved that. No, you did. Like by all means, the Allied invasion from the West Coast, huge deal, huge. However, the total land forces of the Western invasion was one battle of loss in Leningrad. That's the stark difference here in size. People don't quite grasp it. It's like, yeah, there was a huge impact because America is off also fighting the Pacific War. That was huge for us. Without America, we're speaking Japanese. Huge deal.
Right,
But it's
right.
like the national pride you guys have almost transcends reality sometimes. It blows me away. And it's not even like a fuck you
Not
American thing.
sometimes.
It's just
100%
like
all the
it's
time.
crazy. It's not every time. Yeah.
100% all the time. Transcends reality all the time. And it's funny because I think most of us have that self realization that it is a little bit ridiculous, but I think that's a part of um I think that's a part of our culture, and I don't
Yeah.
think it's ever really going to change. Like, we're pretty divided politically right now, but I think we're at this kind of like crossroads where
Yeah.
most people are kind of getting back that sense of like, hey, we've had it pretty good here for quite a
Yeah.
long time. Let's not screw that up. And
Yeah.
I think that I'm really interested to see what happens over the next 5 years or so here, because I think I think we're going to get a new president in office. I think we're going to see someone who's a little bit more balanced.
Yeah.
Because Trump, obviously, he's an interesting character. Biden is definitely an interesting character. And then, as we kind of push forward, I think we're getting back a lot of that. Some of it is not as positive as other parts of it, but we're getting back some of that like national pride and like, hey, maybe we should come together a little bit more. And I think that's always been an American thing, is to be really, really divided and then be able to come together, because we've got to be able to go out there and kick ass. So,
And
it's a good thing and it's a bad thing.
we were in the heart of Reston. We're in the heart of Fairfax. Me and Brooklyn, we go for walks and stuff. Cause like a big thing for us was like, I want to see that standard American suburbia and go through, like, look at that. And we would do it. We'd go through like these walks and go through Reston, and we'd go through DC, and you'd see on just the most random house, just rows of the flag, the American flag, whether it's like hanging off the porch or it's on a flagpole. It doesn't happen here in Australia, especially in suburban living. Like you might see it in like stations out back and things like that, where it's like really outback redneck Australian, and they're really like proud and patriotic to be like what they call a jumbuck and things like that. Like they're hardcore Australians by all means. Like don't piss on the flag because I'll kill you. But in most sense, like you're not seeing the flag being flown in the middle of a city or a suburban living or like things like that. Over there, it was every other like house, whether it was cookie cutter, like suburban, those built up areas or townhouses, there was flags, there's the car has a flag on it, the post box has a US postal box flag on it. Like it's everywhere. Even at like the localist street level, there's like that pride is so present in America. Even when it's not pride, like even when people aren't at the global sense, like proud or like disagreeing, it's just something we don't have, and it's very American.
That's interesting. That's interesting to hear. 'Cause, you know, like I travel other places and I hear that so much. It's like you guys just have a different level of like uh pride, like pride in just being from this random block of planet Earth that you happen to be born
Yeah.
into, you know.
Yeah.
It's like it's so interesting to me, but you know, I'll take it. I think that is important, and it's one of those things. It's kind of an underpinning for all of us because at the end of the day, like despite our differences, we are all American, and I include people that come like you guys come over here, you decide to stay, you're American. And that's one of the great things that I love about this country is that it's like the truly patriotic people, the real patriots here, everybody who wants to come and be a part of this like ridiculous experiment of democracy and capitalism that we have over here is more than welcome to come. And you know, the sky's the limit for opportunity, really. And it is pretty interesting to be a part of a place that really is quite different when it comes to that than a lot of places.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, to wrap it up, because we're going to ramble for fucking ever, and I always say this to everyone, is like I'll schedule 90 minutes and it goes way past that. What is give us one book you would recommend reading, because we're starting to add a collection to our recommended reading list from all of our guests and kind of get people to look at different perspectives. So give us one book on health that you would recommend reading, whether it be blood work, whether it be just general coaching, whatever. And then give us something on history that you recommend reading.
Yeah, Outlive by Peter Attia. I think that came out earlier this year. He talks a lot about kind of what we talked about today, medicine 2.0 and then medicine 3.0. And I think a lot of what we're talking about on the preventative side of things and wondering why, well, wait a second, why are you 400 pounds? He covers that, and I think switching that mentality is going to be huge for getting more people healthy. And then for anyone who hasn't read, or I would maybe recommend listening to the audiobook, but Alexander Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago. That is by far one of the more look at geopolitics, look at things that are going on right now, look at, you know, what's going on in some of our countries. I know your country got locked down pretty hard there for a little bit, and we got locked down pretty hard here in different parts of our country for a little bit, and look at some of the methodologies you know, that were happening back then and some of the things that are happening now, and it'll really open your eyes to where the state of government is. And you know, as far as history, I think some of the things that happened over there in the Soviet Union, I think you really from Lenin through Stalin through the Cold War, I think era is really important for us to look at as far as paying attention to what our governments are doing and being actively involved in knowing what's going on. So yeah, that's probably my top two right now.
Love it. Yeah, very, very good book recommendations. It's a morbid read too. Like you have to take time reading that fucker. That things are hard. Like
it is. Oof. Yeah, it is. It's a lot to get through. And sometimes you just go like, I don't know if because it comes, if you get the unabridged version, right, it's like several volumes, and you get through one and you're like, there's how much more of this do I have to go through? And it's amazing because he kept most of that in his head, right? Like most of it, he was just repeating it to himself in his head over and over again. So it's really impressive. And even if you just do the abridged audiobook on Audible, it's like 40 hours of listening or something like that. So it's insane. But yeah.
Mate, to finish off with, give us all of the ways we can reach out to you, contact you, see your stuff, obviously the Marek guy stuff, all the links and jazz, so that we can attach it to the episode.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say number one, you can find me on the Marek Health website, or you can email me directly at jeriah.hardin@marekhealth.com. Any questions, any interest in anything, because I do coaching, consultations, those kind of things as well on my own. And then and that really kind of spans the bridge of anything health related or psychologically and things like that. If you need some coaching, I'm definitely willing to help out on that front. And then also my Instagram is J Hardin up, J underscore Hardin underscore up. And yeah, you can get at me in the DMs there too. I'm pretty active on there. So
awesome, man. I appreciate your time. Sorry it ran even longer than I expected, but
yeah, it went by pretty quick, man. Definitely fun. We'll have to do it again sometime. Me and one of my peers at Marek are getting ready to launch a podcast soon. We're kind of getting through some of the idea phase of where we want to take it. We'll definitely have to have you on.
man, that's awesome. I'm excited. That'd be fun. That'd be good fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in, and yeah, we'll chat soon.